Hello medicos, this is Dr. Rao and now we are going to start with neuroanatomy. The first topic I am going to cover in neuroanatomy is base of skull, its opening and the contents. So before moving towards the opening and its content, you need to know the bones which forms the base of skull. So imagine a skull as a hemisphere or a skull and you have removed the skull cap. So whenever you remove the skull cap and remove all the brain and its meninges, whatever you are able to see, whatever bones you are able to see, the openings forms the base of the skull. So let us move towards what are the bones which forms the skull. The first bone we are able to appreciate in this picture is the frontal bone, right? Then in the purple color we have our B as ethmoid bone, right? Ethmoid. Now just below the ethmoid, the wing-shaped bone, we call it as sphenoid. Right? Now just lateral to the sphenoid, we have parietal bone. Right? Again, lateral to the sphenoid, we have another pair of bone, we call it as temporal bone. And posteriorly we have a big bone, we call it as occipital bone. So all this bone fuse together to form the cranium, the skull, and all this base of skull has a small opening through which contents either go out or come in. So let us move towards the main part of this lecture, that are openings in base of skull. So I have divided it into two. One, in first part we are going to locate those opening in schematic form, and in second part we are going to discuss its content on the image of actual base of skull, actual bone, right? So first of all, there are 13 openings we are going to learn. Okay, so stay with me. At the end of this lecture, you are going to remember everything which I have taught in this lecture to you. So when we remove the skull cap, we have oval shaped base of skull. So this is the oval shaped base of skull with an anterior and posterior. So my friends, whenever we are going to learn the structures in anatomy, first and foremost thing you should do is you have to recognize the anterior part and posterior part. Whenever you will start doing this, you are going to understand anatomy really easily. Okay, so this is our anterior part and this is our posterior part. Somewhat in center we have pituitary fossa, right? Pituitary fossa. Okay, from this pituitary fossa runs the superior orbital fissure anteriorly. Okay, so SOF. What is superior orbital fissure? In anterior part we have a small opening and we call it as anterior-most part we have a small opening, we call it as foramen cecum. Okay, so whenever I am going to write F dot, it is going to be foramen. Then behind the foramen cecum we have cribriform plate. Okay, so this is cribriform plate. Why cribriform? Because it is sieve-like. It is a bone with very small openings, sieve-like opening. That's why cribriform plate. Now anterior to the pituitary fossa we have small openings, and those are optic canals. Okay. Now this superior orbital fissure separates the anterior cranial fossa, this anterior cranial fossa, from the middle cranial fossa. So all these are the openings present in anterior cranial fossa. Now from posterior there is a structure which is called as petrous part of temporal bone. What is it? We are going to label it over here. Petrous part of temporal bone. Okay, this petrous part of temporal bone separates middle cranial fossa from the posterior cranial fossa. Now let us move towards the openings present in middle cranial fossa. So posterior to the pituitary fossa we have a opening with very irregular margin, and as per the margin says, the name of that fossa is foramen lacerum. Okay, so the name of it is foramen lacerum. Okay, and lateral to this pituitary fossa and foramen lacerum lies the 3 opening. Okay, so let us write it down, draw it down, and then we are going to name it. Okay, so we have 1, 2, and then we have small opening. So you are going to learn this opening by the mnemonics ROS. Okay, so what are those 3 openings? So let us write it down first. F, everybody. So F stands for foramen. Now what I told you to learn by the mnemonics ROS, R-O-S. So first comes the rotundum, right? Then comes the ovale, and then is spinosum. Okay, so all these are the openings of middle cranial fossa. Now let us move towards the opening of posterior cranial fossa. So in the petrous part of temporal bone, we have an opening and we call it as internal acoustic meatus. IAM, internal acoustic meatus. And in this posterior cranial fossa, we have a big opening and we call it as foramen magnum, FM. And just lateral to this foramen magnum, we have small openings, we call it as hypoglossal canal. Okay, and in posterior cranial fossa we have another opening, and that is jugular foramen. Okay, so we are going to write it down over here, jugular foramen. So all these are the openings present in the base of skull, all these 13 openings. Now we are going to move towards the